Picture this. You paid good money for front row seats at the Kaseya Center in Miami. You're close enough to smell the court. You can see every play, every expression, every drop of sweat. It's a regular season NBA game. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then, without warning, two grown professional athletes come flying off the court. Straight toward you. That's not a movie scene. That actually happened. And when the dust settled, one name was all over every basketball feed, every sports show, every group chat. Pippen, not the Scotty Pippen you grew up watching, not the legend from the Chicago Bulls dynasty, his son, Scotty Pippen Jr. Stick around, because this story goes a whole lot deeper than just a scuffle. To really understand what went down that night, you need to understand where both teams stood heading into this game. Because the tension on that court didn't start with one play. It had been building long before tip-off. The Miami Heat were playing at home, in front of their own crowd, with real stakes on the line. Miami is fighting for seeding in the Eastern Conference, trying to stay out of the play-in tournament. That extra round that forces teams on the bubble to earn their playoff spot the hard way. Every win matters. Every game is a chance to climb the standings or fall behind. The Heat had everything to play for. The Memphis Grizzlies, on the other hand, were coming in with a losing record and a season that had largely already slipped away from them. Realistically, the playoffs weren't in the picture. The young roster was grinding through games that felt more like preparation for next year than a genuine postseason push. When you put a desperate, motivated home team against a squad that's already looking ahead, you get a combustible atmosphere. Add in the natural intensity of the NBA, and all you need is one moment, one play to set everything off. That moment came courtesy of Myron Gardner. Before we get to the confrontation itself, let's talk about the man at the center of all of this. Scotty Pippen Jr. The last name alone carries enormous weight in the basketball world. His father, Scottie Pippen, is one of the greatest players in NBA history. The small forward who stood beside Michael Jordan through 6 championship runs with the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s. One of the most iconic duos the sport has ever seen. A Hall of Famer, a legend, growing up as the son of that man. It's a blessing and a burden rolled into one. Every time Scotty Jr. steps on the court, the comparison is right there. The same last name, the same sport, the same league. Expectations that were set before he ever played a single professional minute. Now in his 4th NBA season, Pippen Jr. has been carving out his own identity, not as his father's son, but as a legitimate NBA player with a defined role. Career averages of 10, 1 points per game, and a 40. 2% three-point shooting percentage tell the story of a reliable perimeter scorer who earns his minutes. This season came with its own challenges. Pippen Jr. returned recently after toe surgery. The kind of procedure that disrupts your rhythm, forces you to relearn your body, and tests your mental resilience as much as your physical recovery. He was working his way back, finding his footing, and on this particular night, he was doing exactly what he does best, knocking down threes, until it all unraveled. The game was moving along without any major drama. Pippen Jr. caught the ball beyond the arc, set his feet, and drained a three-pointer. Clean look, good shot. 2 teams competing in a professional basketball game. Exactly what everyone in the building paid to see. But the moment that ball went through the net, something else happened. Myron Gardner went after Pippen Jr. and knocked him down. No whistle, no call. The referees let it go. In basketball, players have a phrase for exactly that kind of contact, a cheap shot. It's when someone hits you after the play is over, away from the ball, in a way that has no competitive purpose other than to send a message. It's not always flagrant, it doesn't always draw blood, but every player in that locker room knows what it means, and they all know how it's supposed to be answered. Pippen Jr. got up off the floor. You could see it in his face. The 3 he hit didn't matter anymore. The scoreboard didn't matter. The game didn't matter. He felt disrespected, unprotected by the officials, and he wasn't going to let it slide. He walked across the court, straight toward Gardner. Most people in the arena expected words, maybe a shove, teammates pulling them apart before anything serious happened. That's usually how these things go. A lot of noise, a technical foul, and then basketball resumes. That's not what happened here. Pippen Jr. grabbed Gardner by the neck and shoulders and drove him backward, hard, toward the front row of courtside seats. Both players went over the edge of the court and hit the floor together, crashing into the boundary between the playing surface and the fans. It took teammates from both sides, along with coaches and staff members, to physically pull them apart. The referees had lost control of the situation entirely for a few seconds. The outcome was inevitable. Pippen Jr. was ejected. And now the NBA's front office would have to decide whether the punishment would go further. Fine. fines, suspensions, or both. Miami won the game, by the way, 134 to 113, a comfortable victory that, under normal circumstances, would have been the headline. Instead, everybody was waiting for the locker room press conference. Pippen Jr. sat down in front of the cameras and gave his version of events. He said he felt contact coming from a direction he couldn't see. He said he thought it was intentional. He said the refs didn't protect him and he reacted out of frustration. That part, completely understandable. Any athlete in that position would feel the same way. But then he said something that instantly became the most quoted moment of the entire night. According to Scotty Pippen Jr., what the cameras captured wasn't a fight. It was just a hug. He was, in his own words, showing love. Showing love. The footage tells a completely different story. Grabbing someone by the throat and launching them into the courtside seating area is not a standard display of affection, but you have to give the man credit for creativity, because as sports press conference moments go, that one is going to live forever. There's a long tradition of players trying to soften the narrative after something goes sideways on the court. Sometimes it works. This time, the gap between what he said and what the video showed was so wide that the internet had absolutely no mercy. And honestly, that was the right call. Now let's step back and think about what this moment actually reveals, because there are a few layers here worth unpacking. The first is the weight of the Pippen name. Scotty Jr. did not choose to be his father's son. He did not choose to share a last name with a Hall of Famer. But he carries that comparison into every single arena he walks into. That kind of pressure is invisible from the outside, but very real on the inside. It doesn't excuse the reaction. He crossed a line, and he knows it, but it adds context to understand where that explosion of frustration might come from. The second layer is the season itself. Coming back from surgery on a team that's struggling with the playoffs essentially off the table, that's a grinding mental space to be in. When a player in that situation feels deliberately targeted and then gets no help from the officials, something can snap. Third, the officiating matters here. Missing that call didn't just fail to protect Pippen Jr. in the moment. It removed the one mechanism that exists to prevent situations from escalating. When players stop trusting that the referees will handle things, they start handling things themselves. And fourth, the unwritten code of basketball. A cheap shot isn't just a foul, it's a statement. And in the culture of the sport, leaving a statement unanswered has consequences of its own. That doesn't justify what Pippen Jr. did, but it explains why he felt like he had to do something. The ejection was just the beginning of the formal fallout. The NBA reviews these situations after the fact, and when physical altercations spill off the court and into the seating area, the league takes it seriously. Fines are essentially guaranteed at this point. A suspension is genuinely on the table, depending on how the disciplinary panel evaluates the footage and the severity of the contact. For the Grizzlies, a suspension would be another headache added to an already difficult season. For Pippen Jr. personally, losing games right after fighting his way back from a surgical procedure would be a significant setback, both for his rhythm and for his case as a dependable NBA caliber player. The league's decision will close the book on this chapter. Whatever they decide, it's going to set a tone for how this kind of situation gets handled going forward. On the surface, this is a fight that happened during a basketball game. Players get emotional, things go too far, someone gets ejected, it happens. But zoom out a little and look at the full picture. The Pippen legacy, the pressure of carrying that name, the grind of a tough season, the recovery from surgery, a cheap shot that went uncalled, and then a press conference where a man described grabbing someone by the throat as showing love. And suddenly you've got a genuinely compelling human story buried inside what the highlight packages reduced to a 15-second clip. Scotty Pippen Jr. made a mistake that night. That's not debatable. But the moment is richer than the clip. The person is more complicated than the reaction. And the sport, as always, is so much bigger than any single play. That's what keeps us coming back. Not just the highlights, the stories behind them. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, share, leave a like, and see you next time.